It's
Yeah.
not what you know, it's who you know.
And how well you
Who do
know
we
them.
already know?
Yeah. Yeah.
We sit around in the room and we go, golly, hey, Betsy, Trevor, we need to get some new donors, some new sponsors. Who do you think we could get? And we all start thinking around and we can't think of anybody. Pull the phone out, the most powerful fundraising tool you've got. Start scrolling through who you know, using the vendor list, doing those things. Help your committee help you.
Hey, everybody, it's Trevor Nelson with a friendly reminder to make sure that you subscribe, like, and hit that notification bell. We really hope you enjoy the episode. Thanks so much.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, everyone. Cool.
Wow, there's a lot of people that don't want their committees to suck.
I haven't swore in probably 8 months, and we're going to have to say suck on this webinar.
Yeah,
Is that swearing? I don't know.
No,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. Well, it's our webinar, so we can kind of call it whatever we want.
Yeah.
No, I like the feedback from Betsy. She's like, "Oh, cool. I like that title. Yeah. That's awesome." Well, at MDA, y'all are so well put together in the committee space as far as like expectation and guidelines, and I've been talking to Amy about that since 2017 about committees and how y'all go about it and stuff. And I looked at, it's so funny. Someone asked me for like a deck on sponsorships and underwriting because we were talking to Amy about that a few weeks ago. And you can tell we're huge fans of hers, but we're huge fans of yours too, Betsy.
Thanks.
But I was like, I grabbed like some old deck and it said 2018, but the thing of it is like it was just still really, really good. Like the
Yeah,
sponsorship underwriting packages and what have you. It was just awesome, So I was like, this
for
stuff
sure.
lives on forever. So
Everybody, we will get here. You see the countdown. I promise you, we'll get cracking right on time, and we'll get you out of here on time.
far
We always
out,
start
yeah.
on time, always no more than an hour, and I promise you, you're going to get some great value out of this. Had a tremendous response. A lot of people registered,
Yeah,
like 150 registrants. So it was really well received. So we're excited to do this and bring this information.
that's awesome. And
Betsy's
also,
coming to us from Minneapolis.
yeah, 612,
Yeah.
612.
Yeah, yeah. That's impressive. I
I
didn't even
do what
know that.
I do what I can do. Yeah. No.
He's
Hey,
like a savant when it comes to area codes.
that's not all, man. Come on, man. Just area
No,
codes.
I didn't say. I just said you're a savant when it comes to area
I'm
codes. It
messing with
doesn't
you.
mean
I'm messing with you.
everything.
No,
I also kind of bragged on you. I said, Trevor's the only guy that could go, it's 10 minutes after the hour. We're starting, in 50 minutes. And he goes, yeah, hey, man, I'm going to go run a 5K real quick, get a little run in, and I'll see you there on time. And I
I
said, he always
legit.
makes it. I don't know how he does it. I'm
You're
not saying that's what you did today, but it's crazy.
well. You'll laugh. That's exactly what I did today. That's so funny. Yeah, I got a little
I
pre.
would still be sitting here going,
I cheated. I jumped in the cold real quick
yeah.
afterwards, and yeah, just to bring the core temp down. No, I'm not afraid to admit it, Betsy. But when I've been a struggling athlete before and needed jobs, or just the first jobs I had when I was in my 20s. I worked in an inbound call center. And I memorized all the area codes so I could speak to people about where they were from right away. So isn't that weird? Yeah. But now I go
That's
to
fun.
what's so funny. I'll go to like races where they hand out the bibs and there's three numbers and I'll be like, oh, 250. Okay, you got British Columbia. 206. Oh, you got Seattle, Washington. Good for you. And they'll be like, what are you talking about? I just did that at a race a couple weeks ago. So, all right, enough of that idiotic
Hey,
area code
Calvin,
game. Yeah.
thank you so much. We're glad to hear you're in sunny, Calvin's in sunny Santa Fe this week.
I love it. Well, it
Yeah.
usually is. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good to see you, Calvin. Hey, everybody,
Um,
thanks so much. If you've been on the webinar before, it's great to see you again, as I like to say. And then if you haven't, it's great to meet you. So thanks so much for joining us. Really, really appreciate it. You want me to go ahead and get us kicked off,
let's
man?
go. Yeah, let's
Yeah,
get it.
awesome. That's my business partner, Jason Ledlow. I'm Trevor Nelson. We're with HGA Fundraising. We provide the most profitable auction items in fundraising. A little bit about us. We had the good fortune of working with Muscular Dystrophy Association for the first time years ago. I want to say 7 years ago, probably when we first kicked off, and we've had a great fortune of working with Betsey Palmgren from MDA as well, national account manager for signature events. So she knows a little bit about why committees don't need to suck And so, so we're really, really grateful that she's here today, and we're still seeing people come in. So thank you so much for joining us. We're gonna spend the better part of an hour talking about why your committee doesn't need to suck, expectations, setting those in place, different bullet points that we're gonna share, real case studies from Betsey's experience, and we're gonna let her go and speak to this because MDA does an amazing job with committee-driven events, and we're also very, very generous at HGA. So stay till the end and win, please. We're going to give away something at the end of the webinar to a lucky attendee, or maybe multiple, depends on how froggy Jason's feeling. At the end of an hour, he might want to give away a bunch of stuff. I don't know. We'll leave that up to him. We're going to give away something though. So
Yeah, for sure.
and then I'm going to go ahead and monitor. We got Bailey behind the scenes from our team. We're going to monitor Q&A, chat feature. This is a very interactive webinar, and Bailey's going to open it up, the chat, so folks can hit us with questions. We'll hit Jason and Betsey with these questions as we go. So please keep it coming, because this is not your grandmother's webinar. We like to keep the conversation moving, and anything under the sun.
I kind of wonder, now that I'm a grandfather, I kind of wonder how I should be taking that. I don't know.
You're one of the young. You're a very young.
No, that's why they call me G Daddy.
Yeah, they made you a grandfather very young.
So Betsey, and just to let everybody know, we're going to kind of break this into two parts. So
Cool.
The first thing we're going to do is we're going to really try to pull out how to manage and get the most out of the committee that you currently have.
Yep.
And then secondly, we're going to talk about how to build a committee for those of you that are going, well, I don't have a committee. And so I think one of the things, Betsey, that we were talking about before we opened it up and everything, just, with committees, your significant experience doing this, is if you just open this up, if you get a committee, it's kind of like, okay, well, now what? And we were talking, and I said, I made the comment to somebody here the other day. I was like, with your committee, they're not eat, sleeping, and breathing this. When they leave the committee meeting, they're going back to their jobs, their families. They got other things to do. They got to get kids from daycare. They've got to go to the grocery. It's life. They've got to go on about whatever it is they're doing. And so we get frustrated whenever they come back to the next meeting and we've done something and nothing's happened. So why don't you, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of outline how you start with these committees and the expectations and how you manage that expectation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great topic for sure. I think there's a few pieces that go into that. From the first committee meeting that you have, whenever that, you kick off your event, creating the expectations in that meeting of what you're looking for from the committee as a whole, from event start to finish. So I would always let my committee know what our goals are financially for the event, because you want them to be as committed to that goal as you are. And they can't do that unless they know, what your goals are. So I think that is really important to let them know and let them in on what we're working towards as a committee. So I would set forth those financial goals, but I would also explain how you're going to get to those. So looking at sponsorship, how many sponsors does that mean? How much sponsorship dollars are a part of that goal? Looking at your auctions, live auction, how many items are you looking at? Silent auction, same idea. So setting those goals from the first meeting, those are kind of broad goals that you'll be reaching throughout the planning process. And then from there, each meeting, I would set goals that are much more attainable and smaller for your committees. So Jason and I were talking about this before the call started. But if you just broadly say to your committee, hey, we really want to get new sponsors. So if you guys could come up with a list, that would be great. And we'll talk about it on the next meeting. Perfect. I can pretty much guarantee you they're going to come to the next meeting with nothing. Yeah. Not because they don't want to, but like Jason mentioned, this isn't their full-time job. They're doing this as a volunteer, and they have a lot of other things going on. So being much more specific in your goals, saying at the end of a meeting, when you're speaking with them, I need each of you to come with three companies that you're going to reach out to. and kind of qualifying those asks. Do you know someone at that company? Is this just a company that you know is philanthropic? Breaking that down, but just asking them to come up with 3. And then in the next meeting, prior to the meeting, a few days before when you send out your agenda, remind them that we're going to be talking about your list of 3 companies, so please come prepared. And then hopefully in your next meeting, because you gave them a more attainable goal, you'd be surprised that some will come with a larger list of 3, but almost all of them will come with that list of 3 because you've made it something that is much more of a specific goal that seems like something they can do versus giving a really broad ask that makes it harder for them to really nail down what that means.
I think what you're saying is being very specific about the goal, telling them what the ask is, and breaking it down into these digestible parts creates something that they can do, because otherwise they leave overwhelmed. They go, I don't know. I got to come up with a bunch of companies.
Right.
I just got to come up with 3 names. Well, I can probably do that. And one of the things that you mentioned, you said you talked about an agenda. Tell me, whenever in your experience with what you do you typically set the agenda? Do you maybe work with the committee chair to set the agenda? Or is this just something, nope, this is the agenda, this is what we're going to do? Because I've been to plenty of committee meetings where if there's not an agenda, and it winds up, the next thing you know, we're talking about the entertainment, what band they're going to bring in.
Yeah.
And that takes up 90 minutes of the 2-hour, because it winds up being a wine deal at somebody's house. And we never got around anything of substance, what I would say about making money. So is that something that you believe is imperative for the nonprofit professionals that are listening to do, or is that
Yes.
just tie us into that, please?
Sure. So I think it depends on your committee. Ideally, it would be great to get committee chair input on your agenda. I certainly wouldn't open it up to the entire committee to have thoughts on what the agenda is going to be ahead of the meeting. Of course, they'll give you their thoughts once you're in the meeting, but that's too many cooks in the kitchen for creating the agenda. If you have a committee chair that's really interested in being kind of a co-contributor to that agenda, I would certainly set a meeting, a week before and put that agenda together. Typically what I do is I put the agenda together myself, and then I send it to my committee chair and ask them for any feedback or any additions that they would like to cover. It's sort of going back to that, making it more attainable for them. I think if you just say, hey, can you give me input about what you want the agenda to be next week? It's a little too broad and it's too much for them to think through. So I like to send them the agenda and just say, can you look this over and let me know if there's anything you want to add or any points that you want to take lead on. And then I like to send that to my committee once we've determined what that agenda is going to be, at least a couple days before. So then they have a chance to look at that and really get their thoughts a little bit more organized before going into the meeting.
Okay. So are you the person, or do you have the committee chair, or is it just kind of depend who's going to hold them on to the agenda?
That would be me. I will let my committee chair definitely take lead on certain topics if they're interested. Otherwise, I lead the committee meeting. But it's definitely my responsibility to keep things on track.
I think the reason I bring that up, because I've seen a lot of times the nonprofit professional that's there feels like they don't want to overwhelm, or they don't want to take over the meeting, or they just, maybe it's a lack of confidence or planning or something, because they're not used to leading something like that. Because a lot of times, our committees are pretty powerful, can be, influencers in the community, powerful people with wealth and things like that. And so we tend to take a back seat, or we'll let them run things. And I'm really glad to hear that you run it, because that's what I have found whenever that person does. Because if you let a committee to their own devices, that's exactly what it'll be. It'll wind up being a social hour talking about stuff that doesn't move the needle. And then, I've been at those meetings. I look over and see the staffer who's is supposed to be running it. They're kind of sitting over there with a glazed look on their face going, oh, this isn't going well.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
and ultimately, go ahead.
Go ahead, Betsey. No, please go ahead, Betsey. Yeah.
Ultimately, you're the one that, is responsible for the budget and the expenses and where this event ends. And so I think it's important to definitely respect your committee and ask for their opinions and let them lead where they want to lead. But in the end, it's your event. And so I think you need to definitely show the committee that you have the ownership and want the ownership over the event. A lot of times committees, if they're running that way, it's just because that's always been what's happened. It's not because they don't want you to step in. It's just that's how it's always been. And so I think don't be afraid to take that ownership respectfully and working alongside them as a team versus them kind of taking over the conversations.
In my experience, it's a relief.
Yeah.
In my experience,
Right.
it's a relief to the committee when somebody steps up to take control,
Yeah.
and direct the meeting to say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do all these things.
Yeah. Do you find, I mean, it sounds like, and it sounds very, the way I'm going to put it is probably very, very simplistic, but it sounds like clear expectations early and then a constant reminder, which is
Yes.
really okay. I mean, you don't need to be frustrated that you're constantly reminding folks of this is the way it's going to be, but the ownership piece of it and what have you, without being, you're not a tyrant about it, but it's clear
Right.
from the beginning, this is how it's going to be. Well, you said something, and we could talk about this for a half hour, but most every single person that's on the webinar or watching as a recording has experienced the too many cooks in the kitchen. Like I wrote down some notes. Jason and I were talking yesterday, like
Hey, Trevor.
pre-production.
Hey, Trevor, turn your volume up just a smidge. We're having a hard time hearing you.
Pardon me. No, we were talking like pre-production. How's that?
Yep.
And it's just like, why there can't be 15 captains on board? You know what I mean? Like, it just sounds
Right.
like it's something that really, like I said, it sounds so simple, but it's something that, and it could be uncomfortable for some professionals to lay this down, but if you lay it down early, you lay it down often, and don't be frustrated if you have to repeat yourself and things like that about the different, metrics and what have you. I like I said, we could talk about that for a half hour. I want to get back into it. We had a quick question though, Betsey, from Kylie. Thanks so much, Kylie. Because she was just talking about how often do you hold meetings? Like how often does MDA hold me? So let's just say the event's a year out. Is once a month good? Would you do it every other month to start? Kind of give us an idea, timeline, if you don't mind. That's a great question, Kylie. Thank you.
Yeah, that is a really good question. I would say once a month, even if you are a year out. The attendance at them might be a little slim based on, how far out you are, but I think it's always better to start those conversations early and have them often. I think if you go any further than once a month, then you start to just lose momentum and you can't quite gain any forward motion because so much time is passing in between.
Yeah.
So I would say once a month for sure. And then usually 2 to 3 months out, we start doing every other week.
Okay.
Just as
Every
it gets
2
a little bit
weeks.
closer. I would say two months out, really doing it every 2 weeks.
Because it's crunch time at that point. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's just so much, no matter how far out you start, there's always so much that comes in those last 2 months.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to have those continued touch points.
Yeah.
So you're checking in and hopefully that helps to manage the flow of everything that's happening at that point.
I love that. I have another question about meetings. That's great. Are you going to hit the question, Jay, or do you want to talk?
Yeah,
about,
I was just going to say, Natalie gave a perfect follow-up to that, which was what I was going to ask the question anyway. So it was great. She said that. She goes, "I've got several event committees. How do you decrease the no-show rates to the meetings? Do meeting reminders and
I have an
polls
idea
for meeting times, etc. But the no-show rate is still low. I think she meant the no-show rate is still high. She actually corrected that. So,
no. And I mean, do you find that, Betsey, or do you like lay out some attendance metrics early on that this is not even going to happen? It's not even feasible. Do you guys don't like see a lot of attrition at your meetings, or is it something that everyone deals with?
I think it's something everyone deals with.
Yeah.
I will say, I think that you mentioned polling the group. I would definitely ask at the beginning, if you set a meeting time, is this the best time to meet? Would you prefer to meet morning or afternoon? So at least you're giving them that option of telling you what their best time is. Now, if they don't show up after that, you did your best in terms of meeting their schedule. The other thing I would say is that if you're having a committee member that is consistently missing the meeting, I would reach out to them and ask if you can have one-on-one conversations. Because it may be that it's not best for their schedule, and it might be that they just have a hard time joining, whatever the reason is. I wouldn't look at that person as just like lost and they're never going to show up. I would really try to have a one-on-one conversation with them, and even see if that's the best way that they want to meet, then that's what you'll do. And you'll just have a one-on-one with that committee member, and you can always bring their feedback back to the committee. It's not ideal if you have a really large committee to do that with each person. But I would say that we certainly see that on all committees, that people just don't always show up, but usually as it gets closer, you'll get better attendance. But I wouldn't be afraid to just ask if, you have committee members that aren't showing on a continuous basis, just to make sure that it's still the right fit for them too.
Yeah.
Sometimes they feel guilty about backing out. And I think just having that honest conversation with them about, like, we genuinely respect that you want to be a part of this and we value your commitment, but we also want to make sure that we're respecting your time. And if this isn't the right fit, we want to make sure that that that's okay. And we'll be happy to have you back next year. And that may be what they need to hear. And then you're both better off. I wouldn't worry about losing a committee member.
If they're not
I would
showing up
just
anyway.
feel, they're not showing up anyway. And then you have ended it in a much better place to have them come back maybe when the timing's better for them.
I want to address that real quick.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I've got a
Thanks,
story.
Betsey. That's
this is
awesome.
a true story that happened with a committee member, and this board committee, they had a goal that they were trying to get to, and everybody was clicking on all cylinders. There's one person that was missing, and that was not attending, not doing some of the goals, not getting everything done that was according. And and I'm going to just preface this way. So the staff and the committee chair had a call with this person, and just said, "Hey, what's going on? What, you're not hitting these goals. You're not being on these calls. What's going on? Is there something we can do? Is there something?" Well, I can tell you, because I was the person they were calling. I was the person that wasn't hitting the meetings. I was the person who wasn't to deal. It brought to my attention. I understood that I was the one holding everybody back, and I got myself in gear, and I made every meeting. I made everything going on. Sometimes it's just, you got to give people that extra nudge, that push. Not not a shaming thing. It was done just what can we do? Don't be afraid to reach out to somebody. I think we get in this deal of, we're so afraid that somebody's going to be offended. The reality is, that's our job. Our job is to, because that's how I felt. I didn't feel mad or upset or anything. I was like, oh crap, I'm the one holding things back.
Yeah, I'm the weak link.
I made a commitment. I need to stick to it. And I think that by reaching out to our committee members, the people that are not holding their end up, not showing, and having that clear, that honest conversation, will open up so many opportunities for your committee to do better, to do well, because they know that somebody cares. Because nobody called me, so I guess it isn't that big a deal. I missed the meeting, but nobody said anything, so I guess it's okay.
I'm piggybacking on something that Betsey said. Hey, maybe you can have a one-on-one with them, and then you spend more time with them, and you can figure out where they're a better fit for the organization and the event in general. I mean, it could be, you could be creating a relationship, with someone long term that you didn't even know, existed. I'm the least experienced out of the three of us with this, but I'm always like defaulting back to the people, that we're working with. And, Jason and I have a company, and there's 20 of us and what have you, and we have a lot of clients and things like that. We always say, hey, we just need to spend some time with that person and love on them a little bit. Like Jason and I are saying to each other weekly. It's like, I think, it's like, I'll call them. I think they need us to love on them a little bit. And that's just a people thing, right? At the end of the day, I think that's the coolest part of it, right? You can just default back to just communicating, right? That kind of thing.
Right.
We've got some great questions coming in, but go ahead.
let's pivot to the next one, because I think it's really, really good.
Are you talking about Julie's question? Julie, thanks so much. Great question. Is that what you're referring to, Jay? Because I think everyone.
I think so.
Yeah,
you want to go ahead and hit it? That'd be great.
This. Yeah, I think everyone's dealt with this probably, right? Like, what if you have a committee chair that digs their heels in and does not want to budge on any topic? They insist on running the show and look at advancement as the workhorse and the committee as the think tank in charge. That's a great, thoughtful question, Julie. Thank you so much. What do you think, Betsey?
That's a good one.
Yeah, it is.
And one that I think everyone will face at some point in their career of working with committees. I think the biggest thing there, my guess is, and I might be wrong, but my guess is that you're experiencing this because they've been involved possibly longer than you have. Because sometimes, these committee chairs have been involved for years beyond, how long a certain staff person has been there. So I think there's a couple of things that go into it. One, I think, is gaining their trust. Depending upon how long you've been working with them, it's similar to what Trevor was saying about like, it's just about people.
Yeah.
I think really getting to know who this chairperson is, why they're involved, why they started getting involved, what's keeping them involved, trying to figure out who they are as a person and how they best work. I would go back to having one-on-one conversations with them for sure prior to your meetings. I think may help how the meetings go, to say, like, I love that you're passionate and I love that you want to drive the meetings. I think it would be really great if we could both lead the meetings in certain areas. So if you take, sponsorship, and then I'll take the lead on auction, and then we can come back together and, work together as a team. I really think having those one-on-one conversations builds your relationship with them to a point where they trust you, and then they know that you're as capable of it. I think a lot of times it comes down to them just not, and it has nothing to do with you as an individual.
Yeah.
They're probably the type of personality that just feels like, if I'm not doing it, then it's not going to be done right. Yeah. And I think just building a relationship with them to prove to them, like, we've got this under control. We greatly appreciate your involvement and want you to continue to be involved. But we're really looking at this as more of a partnership, where we both have roles in this event, and just defining what those roles are.
And it's bigger than us. I always think that, Betsey, you could speak this better than we could, but I always think that you always have, quote unquote, like an ace in the hole. Like, it's not about us, right? It's about, you see what I'm saying? Like, it's not about these personalities necessarily, even in these rooms, and how loud these personalities need to be to get things done. Cause it's not about me, if you're the, development director or executive director or what have, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. It's like, you always have such a great ace in the hole. You can always, that you can always use, is what I think, when it comes to going back to what we're doing, like the higher purpose here,
Yeah. We're all here for the same reason and the same end goal. So working together to get there, for sure.
I want to take a turn on this same topic, because I think it's something that needs to be brought up. And I think that sometimes
it's daunting.
You have to let go of somebody. And I'm just going to talk about this because I want to give you a real life example that I experienced. There was a gentleman, I came to help a nonprofit. I was talking to their committee, and everybody went around to introduce themselves. And this gentleman said, "I've been on this committee for 23 years.
That's too long.
That's pretty much all he had to say.
Yeah, we need term limits on that one.
Real interesting.
Yeah.
And so, now, this is not always the case. There are a lot of committees that have somebody on there and they are workhorses and juggernauts and they bring in a lot of money. So please don't, that's not who I'm talking about.
You got to take the good with the bad sometimes too.
This gentleman, exactly to Julie's point, dug his heels on everything, and you could just tell he was just doing this. So I had a conversation afterwards, not during, this is after we had the meeting and did everything. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking to the CEO of the organization. And she said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well, I think that your bottleneck is you've got one person who's stopping everybody and nobody wants to cross him."
Yeah.
And I said, "Why is that?" She says, "Well, he writes a check for $5,000 every year." Okay. I said, "Well, go find two people that give $10,000 and kick him off and get rid of him."
Yeah.
And this is this is a conversation with here. I don't ever really say
you were being flip. But
I'm not trying to be flip about it. I'm saying, it's a lot of money and to do this. But what they found out was when they did remove him from the committee, here's an interesting thing. They raised about $50,000 more because when they got him out of the way, there were people that he had just pissed off over the years, excuse my language to be so curt, but he had made them so mad that they said, "I'm not going to give another dime as long as he's there."
Yeah.
Because
that's a massive issue. Yeah.
And they wound up raising another $50,000. So sometimes we need to really think about how somebody can, maybe it's time to move on. It's kind of like having limits on a board seat. There's a time when somebody needs to rotate off and you can always keep them on an advisory committee. So sometimes you look at your committee and you see what's going on and why aren't we growing? Why aren't we doing the things that we need to be doing? We're not hitting our goals. And that one person, it takes four people. Trevor and I have talked about this. It takes four people's effort to overcome one person pulling the opposite way.
Yeah, no joke. Yeah, it's real. Once again, it's just an exercise in people and dealing
Mhm.
with personalities. I totally get that. I know it doesn't come naturally to me sometimes, to be honest with you. I mean, and we have a lot of people that we work with. And so I'm very sensitive to it, but it's still, once again, like you said, Jay, 4-1. It's like, yeah, you just get that one bad seed that's been there for 23 years or what have you. What's funny, Betsy can't see these questions, and we're hitting her with them. The cadence and the poignance of these questions is perfect today. So thanks everybody so much. Because when you're talking about like having a one-on-one conversation and making sure folks are in the right seat and things like that to really, make sure everyone's pulling in the right direction. Brittany came in with a great question. So thanks for being patient. And we're going to get to everything. Julie did say, yes, exactly, Betsy. So we got some great confirmation from Julie about that. So thanks, Julie. But Brittany had a great question. Good to see you, Brittany. Thanks so much for coming back. Do you find it's important or necessary to have subcommittee chairs, a chair for the silent auction, a chair for sponsorships, rather than just a committee chair and committee members who are all working on the overall event? What's your feedback there?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of pieces that go into that. One is the size of your committee. I think if you have a very large committee, that's a great idea, because then it is giving people roles within the committee. I think if you have a large committee and you're not breaking it down into subcommittees, you'll end up with a lot of people not doing as much as they could and working to their potential, because there's so many people and so many opinions that everybody kind of has the attitude of somebody else will do it. So I think if you do have a very large committee, it's a really good idea to break it down and find out, have those individual conversations. Where does your interest lie? Is it in sponsorship? Is it in auction? And then kind of split it up that way. I think if you have a smaller committee, it's not as necessary. But if you are finding that even with a small committee, that you have somebody that you don't feel like is doing as much, I would have a one-on-one with them and ask them where their interest lies. Because sometimes with a smaller committee, everyone is doing everything. And there might be someone who feels like they could really help you in your auction, but they don't feel as connected when it comes to sponsorship. And because of that, they kind of back up and don't contribute because they feel like, oh, I can contribute with auction, but not as much in sponsorship. So am I really doing as much as somebody else is doing?
Right.
So yeah, with a smaller committee, I don't think it's as necessary to make it quite as specific with the subcommittees, but I do think it's still important to offer that opportunity to your committee members to focus in an area if there is one side of the event that interests them more than another.
Just put them in the right position to succeed. Yeah, I get
right.
you.
Exactly.
The book Good to Great, it talks about getting the right people on the bus and then getting those people in the right seat on the bus. And committees are very much the same way. You could have all the great best people, but if, to your point, Betsy, if you've got somebody who excels in relationships and sponsorships and you've got them out picking up, stuff for the silent auction, you're kind of wasting some effort there.
Right. And they might be not afraid, but they just want to be respectful and do what you're asking them to do. And so they just kind of go along with the motions if you've made that ask for auction, but really they could be better utilized. So I think it comes down to really understanding each individual on your committee and figuring out where their interest lies and where they can be the most successful.
Taking the time to get to know them, of course. Yeah.
Do you find,
sense. Yep.
That's exactly where I was going to go. Do you find that having like a one-on-one, maybe not a one-on-one in person, but maybe just a phone call with each individual committee person, member of the committee, that really helps?
Yes, for sure.
That's smart. Yeah.
Yep. I think whether it's a new event or an event you're taking on for the first time, or even an event you've done, I would still start out each year with having individual one-on-one meetings with each committee member, making sure they're still wanting to be a part of it and that their interest is still there, letting them know, what you're expecting, and doing the group committee meeting after you have those individual one-on-ones to start an event.
I'm going to be real specific about this because I know a lot of people talk about that. Do you find that's better in person, or do you think that now in 2024, doing it via Zoom, Teams, on the phone, FaceTime, whatever, something like that is adequate?
I think if you can do it in person, I always appreciate an in-person meeting. But I think, again, that's part of kind of getting to know who you're talking with. Some people want an in-person meeting and some people don't. I think it can all be beneficial however you have that individual meeting. But I would just ask the person that you're meeting with, and if it's feasible. We work on events that are all over the country, so it's not necessarily feasible for us to have an in-person meeting.
Yeah.
But if it is, I personally really enjoy in-person meetings, especially because they don't happen very much anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, they're
But
novel.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But it is easier for some people to manage their schedule to go back to back and just be virtual. So I would push for an in-person, but I think just understanding who that individual is and what they would prefer, offering up both situations if you can. Say, I'm happy to meet with you in person or virtually, whatever works best for you, and let them tell you what they would prefer.
Love it. Yeah,
I think
love
that's
it.
that's just back to the having those honest conversations, asking those questions, and being okay with the answer. It's
Yeah.
not necessarily a wrong answer. It's just what's going to be able to do. Um, we're kind of halfway through our time together,
Yeah.
Betsey, Trevor,
More
and what I
great
thought we
questions.
could kind of
Yeah.
kind of move to, which really is framed up by the next question,
Yeah.
where somebody's talking about, Tatiana said, I've been managing committees for many years. I'm seeing more burnout post-pandemic than ever before. How are we finding and activating high-level volunteers? And this is where my question was going to go and kind of what we wanted to spend some time on.
Mhm.
How in the world do I build a committee anyway? How do I find new members for my committee? What are the
Yeah.
best things that you guys at MDA have found that practice that you, or in you, Betsey, just with all your experience to do that?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a couple of different ways I think you can look to find your best committee members. The first is always, are they already involved? So it's always easier to find a committee member that already is familiar with your organization, or is already involved in some capacity, but maybe just hasn't been on a planning committee yet. So I would start there and look in your database and see, if they've been involved, how they've been involved, what are they doing, where might their interests lie. I would also always look at previous attendee lists from your event. So from the year, 2 years, however many years of history you have, look at your attendee list, see who's coming back year after year. You should have access probably to how much they've spent. Sometimes that can correlate to being a successful committee member. Sometimes it can't, but sometimes it's just a good place to start. Because the biggest thing is it's going to be it's sort of like a warm lead versus a cold lead. If you're, talking in more of a sales way, it's going to be easier to work from a warm lead to start than a cold lead. So look within the resources that you have to see who's already connected and maybe just hasn't been approached to be on the committee, or it just hasn't been an opportunity.
I love that.
So I think that's a good place to start.
I couldn't agree more. One of the
Yep.
ways that when I'm working with coaching and they're like, well, I can't get this. And I said, well, who are your top 10 biggest fans? And they go, well, what do you mean? I said, who gives you the most money? For this event, who's giving you the most money? And what I've found in my time is that the people that have given financially are also willing to give more, but they just don't get asked.
And feedback and opinions.
We start assuming that they're too busy, or they're just because they wrote a $25,000 check doesn't mean that they're not going to want to sit on a committee. I found it to be quite the opposite.
Yeah.
That's
That's 25,000. That's 25,000 votes. Right
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
I mean, they may, because at this point they're in.
Yep.
They're voting.
They're invested.
Their dollars. They're putting money towards you, and maybe and they may not be able to do it themselves, but they know somebody who would make a great committee member. Have you thought about Joe or Jan or Bill or Tom, Mary, whatever?
Yeah.
And I just find that sometimes going to the people that we already have that are already in our organization, we just sometimes make assumptions that are wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, it's like, well, I'd really like to get Betsey, but gosh, she's just so busy.
Yeah, but do you know that?
In
Yeah,
my
yeah.
experience,
Right.
the best committee members are the people that are busy. That's why they're busy,
Yeah.
because they get stuff done.
They're drivers. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They're drivers.
Well, that tees up a great question. I hope I'm not interrupting, but Aaron had a great question. A lot of times our committees and their members will mainly focus on silent auction procurement because they don't have the connections to businesses for sponsorships. Is there an ideal person to target to join the committee to help push sponsorship asks? I have my answer. I think Jason kind of just did that, but we want to hear it from you, Betsey.
Yeah. I think what we were referring to look at, who are your top 10 donors.
Yeah.
I think if you're not looking from your specific database, there's ways to find, what companies in your area are really philanthropic.
Yep.
And start there. It's always great to have any C-suite level members on your committee. So anybody that's at that level within a company definitely has some pull within that company and has influence. And so those are great people to know. I think also when you're looking at companies, you want to look at if they have any kind of vendor database that they could pull from. So,
Love that.
if you're looking at a grocery store, for example, they have all of their vendors that want their products in their store. So they could ask all of those vendors for sponsorship.
No question.
So I think it's kind of looking at what the company makeup is, and trying to get the decision makers on your committee, because I think that's where you'll actually bring in some additional dollars. But I also think it's important to make sure there's a connection to your mission too, to make sure that you're getting a quality committee member as well. And sometimes that might mean that you are educating them on what your mission is once you get that meeting.
Yeah.
And then they'll find that they're connected. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to be connected already. It just means that you need to make sure that they feel connected when they're becoming a part of the committee or when you're making that ask.
Would it be crazy to have someone that's been a continued supporter and sponsor in the past? Would it be beyond someone in this position to ask them to be on the committee? I mean, I don't think that would be that's pretty easy. I think that's what you were saying. So. Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely.
And asking, for sure. And asking current committee members, if you think of going to any new event, it's always more fun to do it with a friend. It's always more fun to do something with someone you know. So if there's a committee member that's already on, ask them, who do you think would be a good committee member and why? Why are you referring this person? What do you think makes that person, right for this committee?
Totally.
I have two completely different ways that this came from. These people came to a committee and they were very, very productive. So one person that came to a committee, he worked for a bank, and their junior executives, I guess I would say, they really pushed them to do something philanthropic. And he was asked, somebody came and said, and he was a tennis player. So this NJTL that, helped tennis, were looking for some people for their committee. And that's how he got connected to it. And he jumped in with both feet, really engaged, was a workhorse for him, and ultimately got the bank that he worked for to become on and be a sponsor. Now, it was a couple of years before he did that, but he became a real
That's how long it
workhorse
takes.
for him.
Yeah.
And that was one way, because they were reaching out into the community trying to find people that wanted to do it. The second way that I've seen very successful was there was a couple. They went as guests to with another couple. They didn't have any idea about the mission. They just thought they were going to a party. Fell in love with the mission, wound up buying some trips and donating money, bought a table the next year, and the year after that, they wound up getting on the committee, and ultimately, in about the fourth or fifth year, chaired the committee. And I think sometimes people don't do things because they're not asked.
Yeah.
They're just not asked. They go, we start back to the whole thing. Well, I just know that he's a busy attorney and he's doing this, He didn't care. This is something he cared about.
I think more often than not, people are flattered. I don't even think it's ego. I think that they have opinions, they have feedback, they have experience, and I think that they're willing to share. Like you just said, Jay, I mean, you have to ask. Like I said, once again, someone's that involved in your organization, I think they'd be flattered if you reached out. I don't think you can underestimate the value in that. That's for sure.
Another thing that you can do, post event, is you can send a guest feedback survey to all of your guests that are attending, and have a question on the bottom be, would you be interested in being on our executive planning committee?
Love it.
And you probably will only get maybe 5 responses, but you don't really need that many committee members.
That's great.
No.
And so that's a good way to make them feel like you really value their feedback and value the fact that they attended, because you're asking them if they want that opportunity. I had a similar situation, Jason, where I looked at our top donors from previous year to build our committee for next year, and there was a woman who we couldn't find in our database, didn't see any, previous giving. I reached out to her. We had a meeting, and she said, my family and I like to go to different nonprofit events every few months just for fun. We love to give back. We love to learn about them. She's like, you're the first person that's ever reached out to me after attending an event. So she's like, I would love to be on it.
Yeah, we don't do that enough. Gosh.
Yeah.
Well, does anyone?
So I think, it goes back to just
being outgoing.
Just make the ask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not even asking for money. You're asking for input. You know what I mean?
Right.
We talk about this all the time. It's not what you know, it's who you know.
And how well you know.
Who do we already know?
Yeah. Yeah.
We sit around in a room and we go, golly, hey, Betsey, Trevor, we need to get some new donors, some new sponsors. Who do you think we could get? And we all start thinking around and we can't think of anybody. Or, you see this, the director of development or whoever's running the committee, Betsey would ask that question. Everybody sits around and goes, I don't know, can't think of anything. Pull the phone out, the most powerful fundraising tool you've got, start scrolling through who you know, using the vendor list, doing those things. Help your committee help you to help you do this.
Yep.
There's some really simple exercises that we found that work exceptionally well. The people exercise. Pull your phone out, go to your contacts, and start just calling out names. If you think they might be interested in helping our organization, do you think they'd help our mission? Yep. And what you do is once somebody starts, the next thing you know, you'll have 40, 50, 100 names, and then you can go through and qualify them. Is this person, can they write a check for $10,000 and not miss it? Could they fill a table to come to our event? Do they have special access to something? How can they help us? Maybe they're just be a great volunteer.
Yeah.
But all those things, that's how you start building it. I want to get to Christina's question real quick.
Yeah.
Because I want to hear Betsey's, because I really, my answer is probably all over the board on this.
Yeah. I actually want to get that. We've had dozens of questions.
What do you consider a large committee
large and small?
Versus a small committee? And what do you think the optimum size is?
And I love how, Betsey, you just said that it's so funny, the pace of these questions and how they're coming in with what you're saying.
Yeah.
But you said, hey, you put a survey out post-event, you might get 5 responses, but you just said, but you don't need a huge committee. So get in the weeds with us on that a little bit for folks. Yeah,
that's a great question. I don't think that there is the perfect number for a committee. I really think it's who it's made up of. I think at a minimum, you would want 5 or 6 people just so you have enough to make an impact. I would consider a large committee to be over 10 people.
Yeah, makes sense.
And I really don't think you want a committee that's any larger than 15 to 20. That would be a lot to manage.
Yeah, that's a big boardroom.
Yeah, that is.
It's a big conference table.
Yeah, for sure. I think you could look at, what your financial goal is and kind of base that off of how big or small you need your committee to be. But again, it really is who's on it, not the amount of people that you have. But I think it's good to have at least 5 or 6.
Yeah. Awesome. Good base. That's cool.
Yeah. And then you can build from there.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. We had that question come in multiple times there. Hey, I want to get, I'm not rapid firing, Jay, but we got a little under 15 minutes.
Let's hit it, man.
Robin had a great question. I'm finding difficulty in continuing to find the chair of the overall committee. We have members that are happy to fill the subcommittee roles, but hard to convince someone to be the leader. I'm sensitive to that. I totally get it, Robin. Great question. Betsey, fire away, will you?
Sure. I think with that, the most important thing you can do, if you have the ability, sometimes you have a chair that just up and leaves and you don't have this opportunity. But I would start a succession plan. So having really open and honest communication with your committee chair, how many years do you plan on doing this? Obviously, there's no crystal ball. You can't see into the future to know what's going to come, but are you starting to get burnt out? Do you have a couple more years? Kind of looking at it as maybe a 3 to 5 year role. And, around year 2, you start to look at who could be your co-chair.
Yep.
And you start to train that person in. So that way the committee chair feels comfortable leaving. And then you're not starting from zero and trying to fill that spot, frantically. Then you have somebody that's been there and has seen it and knows the role. Because I think a lot of times being a committee chair sounds daunting. And so trying to fill that role can be hard, but once somebody's actually in it, they realize that it really isn't maybe as much as they thought it would be. And so I think having that time to have that transition is helpful.
Yeah.
If you have the ability. Again, if you have somebody that just drops, then I would look at creating a co-chair. So if it is that you just are completely out and you need somebody to take that role, split it into two. So again, it makes it seem more accessible and it doesn't seem quite as much of a heavy lift. And it may seem on your side, you're like, I don't need two people in this role. But if that's what it takes for you to get it filled and have two confident people who then either one of them could step up, in the next year if one drops off, you're kind of creating that flexibility so that you're not in that position where you're struggling to find a chair.
Love that.
I want to just chip in on this. I think one of the things that people say no is because maybe the person that was there that just dropped out, the reason they dropped out because they didn't see an end how to get off, and so they just quit. And the healthiest committees that I've ever dealt with were ones that had exactly what you said. It was like a 5-year list, 3 to 5 years, something like that, where you would work up. If you would become the, I'm going to say like the junior chair, but it was known that the next year you were going to take over the chair of the committee, and the chair they were going to step away, but they were going to be there for that institutional knowledge, you might say, to be there to help, but they were basically done.
Right.
And that way everybody knows what it is. They know what that obligation is, because they don't want to get on there and fail. The one thing I think that people reject, or that when they reject these opportunities to serve, is because they don't want to fail. They're terrified that they're going to let the organization down. They're going to let the committee down. They're going to let you down, and they don't want to do that. So a lot of times having that conversation with them, back to having an honest conversation, to say, what's holding you back? You've been on the committee for the last 4 years. You're really great at what you're doing. What's holding you back? And they go, I just don't want to screw this up. I mean, I've seen that, heard that come out quite a few times. It's like, but you're not going to screw it up because I'm going to be here.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to do this together. I'm going to be here to do this, having the agenda set, having this stuff, making sure that you keep you and the committee on track. That's my job. My job is to help, to be that, facilitate. Your job is to help raise more money and, to be there to inspire everybody. And I think sometimes we don't give that really good job description, if you would. We leave it to, there's too much out there. And maybe it's because we have not written it down. I think every committee chair should have a written job description of what they're responsible for.
Love it.
Yep.
Just like we have an agenda before a meeting. We're going to have a written job description. They know what they're responsible for.
I think there's an overarching theme of communication here. I know I'm just going so simpleton on y'all, but I mean, it's like, people don't know what they don't know. So if you don't communicate it in writing, if you don't remind them verbally, if you don't have conversations and spend time with them, love on them a little bit, things like that, go get a cup of coffee, figure out what's going on in their life, things like that. I mean, it just sounds like, once again, just a giant people exercise, and communication has to be at the top. Like I said, sorry for dumbing it down so much, but it just seems like that's the overarching theme. Yeah.
No, I would agree. I mean, I think building strong relationships with your committee members, really individually knowing who they are, is huge in your success. And then them trusting you and just wanting to work harder on the event, because they know that you care not only about the event success, but about them individually, and that Jenna, you care that they're there.
Appreciate the feedback, Jenna. Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of the same thoughts and questions, and we totally get that. And Betsey's seen it all, it seems like, of course, at this point. That's for sure. I want to get a few more questions going as well. Sorry to cut you off, Betsey.
No, you're good.
How do you train, Christine, great question. How do you train a co-chair? Did we just kind of like uncover that just now? How much training does it demand in your estimation? Things like that?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily look at it as training as much as making sure they're comfortable and understanding their role, like Jason mentioned. Sitting down with them and really laying out what the expectations are. The other thing is, I think when people aren't the chair, they don't understand that a lot of what the chair is doing is really making the connections, but you're providing all the material.
Yeah.
We provide all of the materials that any of our committee members need to make an ask for auction or sponsorship. We'll write an email for them, and all they have to
Yes.
do is put their name on it.
Right.
So I
right.
think, that the training is really kind of an ongoing process. But the biggest things are making sure they understand what you're asking of them and what the event goals are. And I think that just kind of comes as you're working through the process. But I think if you do have a new chair, it's more important to have those individual one-on-ones with that person, for sure, for the first year that they're on an event.
Love it.
So it is time consuming, but it's not a whole job in itself.
And it's worth it.
I had somebody say one time, they were talking about this, golly, yeah, I spend some time, and somebody goes, well, isn't that the job?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that what, that's just, it is what
Sorry.
it is.
Yeah. Sorry to put
Yeah.
it
Yeah,
so
you know,
plainly.
it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be a full-time job, but it's part of it. And, you know, we teach people how to treat us too. I heard somebody say, we had one of the questions was, they want to go out here and just talk about they just come up with great ideas and expect the staff to do it.
Mhm.
And the reason they do that is because that's what they've been allowed to do. They've been, the staff has reacted that way. If somebody said jump, they're like, okay, we'll jump. And responding really simple ways. Whenever somebody says, hey, I've got an idea. We ought to do this, this, this. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's got a committee member that has a lot of those kind of ideas. He was a past president, and he thinks that he can come up, well, you need to do this and you need to do that. And she goes, what do I say to him?
Mhm.
And I say, well, friend, you've got all these great ideas, but I think the person that, can make that call would be you,
Right.
Yeah.
because you have
Put
the
it on them.
relationship.
Yeah. Put it
Now,
on them.
I can help you close it down, but if you'll make that introduction to me and get this thing teed up, you betcha I'll bring it home.
And they feel
Right.
value too. Those ideas are
Having
valued
that
at that point.
conversation
Yeah.
to redirect that, to
Mhm.
get that buy-in, not from a confrontational standpoint, but just say, sure, I think that's a great idea, but
Yeah.
here's what I need you to do back for me to help me get that done.
No question. Yeah.
Right.
We're going to give
Hey,
something away here in just a
Yeah, let's give
second.
someone away. I love the feedback, Jesse. Hey, Jesse, thanks so much for the feedback. If you have any great idea, if you have anyone influential in the community, I highly recommend having them on your committee. For example, we had a county manager on the board, and he was able to tap local businesses and brought in a ton of money. That's awesome feedback and great food for thought for everybody to consider. Once again, it's going to be, you want to get the right people in the seats. Less could be more in these situations, it seems like, as well. I mean, you don't need, like you said, you don't need 15 people if they're all running around. Tatiana said, or do you feel like people are having commitment phobia more now? Maybe they're the wrong people, Tatiana. I don't know if
Right.
they're not committed to the mission,
Yeah.
and you're having any phobia or any kind of like you're sensing any trepidation. They're probably not the right people for the seats. I'm sorry for speaking so bluntly, but we're short on time. Does everyone concur with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
and something I want to just put out, if you're doing this and you're going, boy, I need to dig in on some stuff, go to hjfundraising.com, sign up
Yeah,
for
I
a
was
free
gonna
coaching session.
yeah.
The link is right there. Bailey put it in here. Sign up for a coaching session. I can assure you, you're going to get some value out of it. We'll spend an hour with you, Trevor, myself. One of us will be able to do that and really go through this for your specific situation. We've got a lot of experience with this because we're fortunate that we get to work with wonderful people like Betsey and professionals like you all over the country. So we get all this data and all this information that we want to share back out about how this stuff works.
We're information vessels, and we're the same off the air as we are on air, right, Jay? I mean, we're the same. So,
Melissa, your question about how to keep your committee motivated when they are not meeting sponsorship goals. I think sometimes I think the goals may be unrealistic. Maybe we didn't give them the right things. Maybe we didn't set them up with the right process. If we just kind of say, okay, you got to go out and raise $10,000 and go get it.
yeah,
And we haven't talked to them about how to raise those $10,000, how to invite people. One of the biggest things, and I'm going to use just 1 minute of this. One of the biggest things I see, the challenges that committees all do, that not everyone understands what the mission is, and they can't recite it in the same way. It's
The
a
mission's
funny
message.
sounding little thing, but if you
Yeah.
ask them, well, tell me what do you guys do? They'll kind of go off and, well, we do this and this and this and this.
we're a
and this and this and this.
501c3, and
Yeah, if you can't answer that in less than 10 words, you're going to struggle because you can't start a conversation.
yeah,
And what we want to do is have a conversation, not just throw up on people. And
Mhm.
so when we empower our committee members with what we do, like if you ask anybody at our company, you say, hey, what do you guys do? We help nonprofits raise more money. That's what they're going to say. And if they don't, we're going to
Yeah.
have a stern, no, I'm just,
I was going to say
they're
they're
that.
going to probably be on probation.
They're
Yeah.
going to say that. But it's that whole idea of, we send kids with cancer to camp. I mean, whatever your mission is, you can break
Yeah.
it down and help that. That's going to empower them to start sharing so much more.
Not your mission statement, but your mission's
yeah.
message. It's a tongue
Exactly.
twister for,
What do you
for
guys
folks
do?
like me. Yeah.
So sign
Well,
up for that
and we-
coaching session.
Oh, sorry.
No, go
No,
ahead.
it's
Go
good.
ahead.
I was
wanna
just
hear it,
gonna,
Betsy.
one quick thing that, we
Please.
do that I find helpful is for all of our committee meetings, we start them with a mission moment. And
Love it.
sometimes that can be something brief where we
Great
just
idea.
update on, a new drug approval or that our
Right.
summer camps are happening.
Right.
And sometimes that can be bringing a family on to our calls. Bringing somebody that is a part of your mission onto a
Yes.
call to just tell their story, to re-engage your committee. Because sometimes it's not that they have lost interest in the mission. Sometimes they just haven't heard what's going on lately, and they just
Good
need
for-
a reminder as to why they're there.
I love that. That is so well. I mean, like, think
Good
about
stuff.
this. I mean, oh, that was so good, Betsy. Seriously, like, hey, this is what we're doing. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. I just think it's like, I know that folks care, even though they're seldom meeting. If you do anything only once a month, even if you give folks some work to do when they go away, I mean, you can still be effective. I'm not saying folks can't be, but
Oh, yeah.
if you're a runner, you don't run once a month and go, oh, I'm going to start breaking records. You know what I mean? You need a refresher course, right? And things I think that's amazing. That was great, Betsy. Awesome.
Hey,
Awesome.
We've got a winner, Trevor.
What's their name? What's their name, Jason?
Boundy, come on down. You're the next contestant on HGA free webinar series. Just
The no
reach
whammies. Press your
screen.
luck with HGA.
that screen a little bit harder. There it goes.
Nice.
All right. Let's see what Betsy won. Amanda won. All right.
Far out. What do we get? Oh, $300.
HGA bucks. Congratulations.
Far out. You could bribe your committee with that.
Congratulations.
You could bribe your committee with that. No problem. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. Yeah.
Great.
That's great. Yeah, we like to goof off and give stuff away, Betsy. Sorry
Yeah.
about it.
So you can use that for any one of our items.
That's great.
So $300 off of any one of our items for your next fundraiser. So congratulations to you.
Cool.
Betsy,
Yeah, hey.
wow. We could just keep talking about this, couldn't we, Trevor?
totally
Great.
could.
Thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
Hey,
We're so appreciative.
Sure.
real quick before we hop, we will be reaching out with the coaching links, all that good stuff. This is not our time is free, by the way, everyone. So absolutely, we'll send out those links. I think it's Lilia. I'm sorry, my vision this far away from the screen. You have a huge donor database. What's the best way to reach out to them? Do us a favor, just sign up for a free coaching session and we'll discuss it. Our time, once again, is free. So feel free to reach out and do that. And you can spend some time with Jason or myself. And yeah, happy to do it. Also, by the way, we're super easy to reach, y'all. I'm Trevor at HJFundraising.com, Jason at HJFundraising.com. Everybody, wherever you're at, give Betsy a round of applause for spending this much time with us. It was really, really cool, Betsy. So cool. Thank you
so much, Betsy. It means a lot for you to share your time with us.
No
Of
question.
course.
I think everybody
Yeah,
got a
thank
lot
you for
out of
having
that.
me.
That's going to live
Everybody
on
have
forever,
a great
so
week.
Thank you.
We really appreciate you, and we'll talk to you real soon, okay?
All
Thank
right,
you so
all
much.
right. Bye, y'all. Thank you so much. See you next week. Bye now.